What's going on? Read your press. I was right.
We should always find time to express how we feel about the moment that is a reflection of joy.
Small business owners are not feeling that great about the economy.
Golly gee, we got a humdinger for you today. Joe Biden claims that he was right about Afghanistan, a Kamalaism for the books. Jobs slow, and should the Fed be worried about too much transparency? All that and more coming up on this episode of Daily Call Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Jobob. Daily Call Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
You might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually their name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Call Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. On today, it is Friday, July 7th, the year of our Lord, 2023. Got a lot going on today. Now, on the onset, I would like to tell you that we do have another Kamalaism. If you're new to the show and you're not familiar with what a Kamalaism is, it is when Kamala Harris rambles on incoherently, repeating phrases as if she is smart and proves to be otherwise. But I'm going to do the adult thing. We're going to talk about more pressing issues first, and then for dessert, we'll have the Kamalaism probably towards the end of the show. But first, we got to get started with this. You know what I sounded like right there? I know that it sounded like Ben Shapiro. If you guys listen to the Ben Shapiro show, anytime he reads an ad, he'll say, we'll get to all of that, but first, Jeremy's Razors. So, in my own head, I think I sounded like that just now. So let's start off with this. Actually, I lied. We're going to start off with this. Joe Biden claims he was right about Afghanistan. Now, what does that exactly mean? Well, we'll get into it a little bit. So just to backtrack here just a tad, to kind of level set and to understand where we are in this whole Afghanistan investigation, how Joe Biden is responding to it, what the transparency at the federal government level is with it. In April-ish of this year, there was a report put out that outlined all of the varying problems that happened in Afghanistan. Some of the military failures, some of the leadership failures, some of the strategic failures, all happening when we decided to disastrously pull out of Afghanistan in August of 2021. I'm now just reading this. Holy moly. I'm going to have to pull up this article somewhere else because the way that it formatted in my phone is not... Oh, never mind. It is legible right here. All right. So check this out. This is a report that came out in April, but wasn't released to the public until Thursday of last week. Interestingly enough, right before a 5-day July 4th holiday. So obviously interesting, the timing of this, that it's coming out. But I want to read something from Politico kind of talking about this. Remember, this report was done in April, wasn't released until a day before a 5-day weekend, and now the Biden administration, according to the Politico article that I'm about to read, is seeming to try and bury the Afghanistan report. The Biden administration, wow, I shouldn't have read what I already just read, seemingly tried to bury an Afghanistan action report detailing how it didn't plan well enough for the military withdrawal and failed to foresee the ensuing chaos. The State Department released a largely redacted document late on the Friday before the long 4th of July weekend, perhaps in hopes that it would garner minimal attention. But we still had to spend some time between burgers on, that's a fun little anecdote from Politico. Bottom line is, they held on to it and then released a heavily redacted version right before a long holiday weekend. Isn't that fantastic? The highlights of the 90-day, 24-page public review included there was not sufficient senior-level consideration of worst-case scenarios and how quickly those might follow. In other words, remember when Joe Biden said, well, Kabul's not going to fall. The Afghani people and the Afghani government will do just well holding it off against the terrorist organizations such as the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and all of the varying factions within those organizations. that clearly was not really taken into account, as they said, yes, insufficient senior level consideration for worst case scenarios. In other words, they didn't dang plan for this thing. While predictions, this is another bullet point, while predictions varied, up until almost the time Kabul fell, most estimates that were the Afghan government and its forces could hold off the city for weeks, if not months. In other words, they believed that the propped up government of Afghanistan was going to be able to hold off the religiously motivated terrorist groups that eventually took Kabul in a matter of days, not weeks, definitely not months. Another knock is this. It was unclear in the department who had the lead on the non-combat evacuation operation known as NEO. Naming a 7th level floor principal, Bottom line is, nobody seemed to be in charge over the entire thing. It was just a huge debacle. And this is, again, it's not new information. We all saw this with our own eyes, but this is coming from the government itself, detailing how bad they did on all of this. Last major bullet point, constantly changing policy and guidance and public messaging from Washington regarding which populations were eligible for relocations and how the assembly should manage to reach out and flow added to the confusion and often failed to take key facts on the ground into account. In other words, to sum up the summary of the 24-page document, the Biden administration failed on every single level. And this particular article doesn't mention the fact that we abandoned the Air Force base that was secure and guarded in preference for the Kabul airport, which is not secure, not guarded by any stretch of the imagination, and right in the middle of downtown. Also only had one runway. What was the saying? There was a funny meme going around. It was like Sun Tzu, The Art of War. The first step in the art of war is abandon your most strategic airport. Obviously, that was sarcasm and satire, and the fact that that's exactly what the administration decided to do. So the bottom line is they screwed up on a ton of different levels and then tried to bury the report by releasing it on a weekend right before 4th of July holiday. Now, how does Joe Biden respond to that? Well, not well. I want you to watch this video clip, and then you tell me if he's justified in saying what he is saying. Check it out.
Mr. President, do you admit failure in Afghanistan? Mistakes. There was a report on Afghanistan withdrawal saying there was failure, mistakes. Do you admit there was mistakes during the withdrawal and before?
No, all the evidence is coming back there. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al-Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right. Thanks.
So Joe Biden says that, well, what's going on? I said this, first of all, this is not what he said. But even if he did say it, does it actually matter at all? He said, just there, back at that time, I said that Al-Qaeda wouldn't take over. And look, Al-Qaeda didn't take over. Oh, okay, yeah, it's the Taliban, Mr. President. I wouldn't call that a win. If you say, hey, my neighbor didn't punch me in the face, my cousin did, you still got punched in the face regardless of who it is that's doing the punching. Who cares? So to sit here and claim, well, one, inaccurately, because I don't remember that being the focal point of the Biden administration political messaging conversation, that, whoa, hold on, all of this, everything going on at the time, Al-Qaeda's not going to take over. I don't remember that being a central talking point for the administration. And even if it was, another terrorist organization, as classified by the federal government and the military, another terrorist organization took over. So in what way does that make him right about it? I guess if you want to go with completely arbitrary predictions, you can say, if you're going to guess something, you have to put some skin in the game in order to claim victory once that outcome is achieved. In other words, if I say this table is brown, this desk is brown, and the building around me is on fire, and I have to evacuate and everything burned down, I don't get to claim I handled that situation appropriately. I told you that the desk was brown, and I was right. Again, comical, again, from the President of the United States. Well, it's not Al-Qaeda. Okay. It's the other terrorist group then. I don't think you get to claim victory on that front. But what else is new with the Biden administration trying to hide what happened in Afghanistan? Moving on, also talking about Joe Biden and the administration. A new jobs report came out yesterday. Was not as strong as expected. Here's the problem with jobs reports and jobs numbers and all this sort of stuff. The expectation, who sets the expectation? Actually, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But the fact that there's any expectation set, and I think it's set like the day before the jobs reports come out. So the jobs reports is either soft or strong or this or that, the other thing based on expectations. But who's making the expectations and what credentials do they have to just decide that this is what it's supposed to be? I don't know. Bottom line is jobs numbers eased this month with the jobs reports coming out yesterday. 200,009 jobs were added to the American economy, which would mean that possibly employers are slowing their roll when it comes to hiring. Here's a quick Fox News clip, kind of maybe explains it and possibly a little better. I don't even know. I might just repeat what I just said. Check this out.
And then overall, also, our small business owners are not feeling that great about the economy. They've been hit with inflation. They've been hit with, overall labor shortages. And right now, they basically have put a pause on hiring. And in fact, 2/3 of our small business owners are not feeling great about the economy in the next 3 months. They don't want to hire and they don't want to increase wages.
Yeah. That should not be shocking to really anybody. When inflation is what it is, the difficulty in borrowing because the interest rates are so high is going to put a pause on hiring at a bunch of different levels. We'll see how this goes. I am not going to pretend like I know what's going to happen with the economy. But the Federal Reserve acting in the way it probably should, raising the interest rates to tamp down inflation, causing employers to be skeptical about hiring people, which is not a great... The economy cooling is not a great headline to make me feel better about going on a comedy tour in the fall. With people penny pinching and clutching their wallets, I'm going to charge them $25 to come see me make trans jokes. So not the best timing, I'll admit, but I guess it is what it is. But this I thought was the most interesting thing about the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, kind of an autonomous federal agency, kind of controlled by the government. The President of the United States, if you don't know this, appoints the Fed chair, and they serve for, I think, 4 years. And so, again, it's kind of autonomous and kind of controlled by the government, whatever. But in the last several years, the Federal Reserve, probably let's say the last decade, has been very, very transparent. And because that's about the time that I started paying attention to politics, I've always thought that was kind of the norm. The Federal Reserve is this open book, and they're telling people what to do and this and that and the other thing. And it didn't really dawn on me that could affect the markets vastly. So with that, I thought this piece from the National Review was really, really interesting. Basically, without getting into the entire nitty-gritty, because I think I'm going to read quite a bit of it, the argument being made is that the Federal Reserve should stop being so transparent and go back to the ways that it was in a Wizard of Oz-esque behind the curtain. This is Kevin Hassett writing. It wasn't so long ago that the Federal Reserve provided almost no real-time information to investors, with market participants left to themselves to try and figure out what they were up to. For example, a 2006 academic article written by a Fed economist during the controversy over the Fed switching from targeting the money supply to targeting federal funds rate, a policy change had never been announced. After a careful study of the transcripts, the paperwork concluded that the Fed had switched the policy target in 1982. It took more than 25 years for academics to officially confirm the switch. In other words, this is just an example of the Federal Reserve acting autonomously and behind the curtain to adjust rates, to target different things in terms of economics. Wow, that was the most ridiculous thing I've heard. To target different things in terms of economics. Words, sometimes they're difficult to come across. But the varying components of an economic system, targeting them in ways that were going to affect the overall economy is what the Fed was trying to do. And the bottom line here is that in the past, the Fed used to operate out of the public view. We didn't know what they were doing specifically because they wouldn't announce particular policies being changed. We would just have to figure them out. Nowadays, Hassett continues, says, of course, the Fed is as transparent as it can be. Its policy targets are announced loud. Its future policy for the next few meetings is signaled well ahead of time, and the information published by the Fed does not just focus on policy. On a quarterly basis, Federal Open Market Committee members report their forecasts for real GDP and unemployment rate, and the inflation rate, and a path of policy rate. In other words, they are an open book at this point. Now, I, generally speaking, am all about government agencies being as transparent and as open as humanly possible. However, when you're so wrong about things, should you be tipping your hand to the field of the public eye so that the public eye loses trust in your ability to do what you're supposed to be doing? Now, the Federal Reserve, obviously is in charge of the monetary system, the central bank of the United States. Now, in a lot of ways, the only thing they can really do is inflate or deflate interest rates. And I probably should not have used those terms because inflate and deflate and inflation is not... In other words, that was confusing. They can move interest rates up, they can move interest rates down. That's effectively all that they can do. They can only do it for the overnight lending interest rates, which then the banks piggyback off of that. If you don't understand that, one, I'm not entirely sure that I do, but two, there are better videos to watch on that than me. So go do some homework on that end. There's this whole idea, too, with the Fed buying back bonds from the Treasury, which is another weird kind of thing. But we won't get into all that right now. The bottom line here is that the Fed is super transparent. The problem with being super transparent is when you're often wrong. The article goes on to say this: in September 2020, let's put our remembering caps back on, the Fed expected 2021 inflation, as measured by PCE, to be 1.7%. with inflation climbing to 1.8% in 2022 and 2% in 2023. Now, if you don't know this, the Federal Reserve's target for inflation is 2%. They want to encourage spending, which bolsters the economy. If inflation is at 2%, they believe that that is the correct number in which people can still save money without the inflation rate blowing up their savings, but also incentivizes people to spend money now as opposed to later, because inflation eats away at your savings little by little. Given that the federal target rate is 2, one can say that the Fed had high confidence it could achieve its target inflation. Again, remember, in September of 2020, we're 6 months, 9 months, 8 months into the pandemic at this point. We have a ton of federal spending going out the wazoo, and the Fed expected the 2021 interest rate to be 1.7%. By June of 2021, it was apparent that all deficit spending was spinning out of control and inflation was picking up as well, having climbed all the way to 4.4%. In other words, the Federal Reserve was wrong by almost 200%. How did the Fed respond to the spike in inflation? It told everyone that it was transitory, another wrong assumption, and worked that observation into its forecast. In other words, the Federal Reserve misdiagnosed why inflation was happening after already having guesstimated the wrong inflation numbers, and therefore operated their new policy going forward based on inaccurate guesses and inaccurate diagnosis of the problems. Remarkably, at the June meeting, the Fed predicted 2022 inflation would drop all the way down to 2.2% in 2023 and stay there in 2024. I'm hoping this isn't getting too numbersy into the weeds here. But inflation in 2022, if you will recall, was not 2.2%. By September of 2022, inflation had climbed to 6.4%, meaning the Fed's forecast for 2022 was wildly inaccurate, probably because their diagnosis of why inflation was so high in 2021 was so wrong. But even then, the Fed expected inflation to drop to 2.83% in 2023, all the way down to 2% in 2024. In other words, they keep being super optimistic and wrong constantly. Now, judging by the viewers and the comments slowing down, I would imagine that that's probably enough of the minutia of the Federal Reserve. But the bottom line is, transparency is great, especially in policy that affects your life. But considering that the Federal Reserve is supposed to be an apolitical actor that is, for the most part, autonomous from government control, maybe transparency and therefore the ushering in of politics into the situation is not the best idea. The Federal Reserve is supposed to try and keep inflation at 2%. And if they are still autonomous, not wanting to get involved in the political scope, and have objectives that hopefully will inflict a good outcome for everybody, or at least for the economic culture, maybe they don't need to be so transparent in that they are wildly wrong with a lot of their guesses. That's basically what the article wraps up to say, not to get into more of the nitty-gritty weeds of it. But the bottom line is the Federal Reserve has been very transparent, but wasn't always, and maybe they should go back behind the curtain so that, one, a lot of people don't know that they are entirely wrong all the time, and two, they don't get dragged into the political mud, and don't have to continually say, we're optimistic, we're optimistic, we're optimistic. That should be the job of politicians, because when the Federal Reserve says we're optimistic, that means that has a huge effect on the markets. And if the markets are reacting to emotions rather than economic triggers, you can cause a bigger collapse when it finally does collapse. Again, I understand that this is a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's important, and I think it's fascinating how the Federal Reserve is working, and also I think being pulled into the politics of it all. You know what? Hey, Jim, thanks. Just took a glance at the comment. The first one that popped up was Jim saying, this Fed story is outside of my wheelhouse. Good job at trying to explain it. I hope. I don't know. That's the thing. I have no idea. I appreciate the compliment. I have no idea if I explained that well, or if we need to break that down even more on a basic level, because a lot of I'm in this every single day. This is what I do for a living. Like I'm a news hawk. I like this stuff. But I understand a lot of people have different jobs. If you're, I don't know, in manufacturing, you've got a family. Yeah, you don't have time to dig into the minutia of the Federal Reserve. So I don't know at what level to start these conversations off. Do we start off at, I don't know, what the Federal Reserve is? I don't know. Bottom line is, hey, appreciate it. Hopefully that wasn't so confusing. Hopefully it wasn't as confusing as it might have been for some people who might not understand the Federal Reserve as much because they have real lives. Anyways, as promised, here we go. Kamalaism 12,057. I don't actually know that this is Kamalaism 12,057, but I decided to give it a big number. And I felt like getting into the six figures of the numbers was pretty too high. Kamala Harris, over the last couple of days, there's lots of clips that have come out from this particular speaking engagement in which I think, I'm going to watch the video again. I'm pretty sure she's on stage with Sunny Hostin. I don't know. The host on The View. And the reason why I think that's funny, I'll explain in a second. But again, as promised, the Kamalaism of the week, maybe of the month, is this. Now, as per usual, I'd like to ask in the comment section, is this worse than her other bumbling? Her other instances in which she says things like, the significance of the passage of time is significant because the passage of time signifies the significance of the passage of time. Is this worse than that? I'll leave it up to you. Check this out.
Well, I think culture is, it is a reflection of our moment and our time, right? And present culture is the way we express how we're feeling about the moment. And we should always find times to express how we feel about the moment that is a reflection of joy, because you know, it comes in the morning. We have to find ways to also express the way we feel about the moment in terms of just having language and a connection to how people are experiencing life. And I think about it in that way too.
Oh my gosh, that was it. I honestly hadn't watched the entire thing because I wanted to react live with all of you folks. That one is the winner. The reflection of the moment of time causes us to reflect emotionally on the moment of time as we reflect. Now, reflecting on the moment is such that it comes in the morning, joy, as it is the moment, particularly in this time. I personally, I think we have a winner here. I think this might be the Kamalaism to top all Kamalaisms. Oh my gosh. And the thing, okay, so I'm gonna do a quick replay here because this is my favorite part about all of these Kamalaisms. I'm gonna do this without volume, and I'm gonna scrub to the video, the point of the video where I think it happens. This is my favorite thing. Watch it. It's the head nod and the laugh, as if she has just dropped some knowledge upon us simpletons that we can so not comprehend the wisdom and the grandeur of Kamala Harris and her dictations to the public. That's my favorite part. Yeah, I just dropped some heat on y'all. That is I love it. And now, of course, the question is she aware of this? Has somebody in her camp finally garnered the cojones to say, Kamala, I don't know if you know this, but people make fun of you when you don't prepare for things and end up talking in rambling sentences and repeating yourself over and over and over again. And as a person who speaks a lot, especially when I'm in front of crowds, there are some moments where it seems off the cuff, but I promise you I've prepared for pretty much every scenario. Unlike Kamala Harris, who doesn't think about things ever. Does she have any amount of interest? She sit alone sometimes when she is alone and think, how could I improve this? Or does she get off the stage right there and in her head believe, yeah, I just dropped some truth on those people. Boom, mic drop. Everything I say is a mic drop moment. Is that what she thinks? And if so, I cannot wait for her to run for president. Those of you who are new to the show might be shocked at hearing that. But I guess my most unpopular opinion, but also it shouldn't be unpopular, is that I cannot wait for Kamala Harris to run for president. I want to see Kamala versus Gavin, and I want to see Kamala Harris come out on top. I want her to win the Democratic nomination for president of the United States. It would be my greatest joy, knowing that if she were to become the Democratic nominee for president, she would lose 48 states, and I would think that is hilarious. So anyways, I think personally that is the Kamalaism to top all Kamalaisms. If you agree, let me know. Wow, first comment we get to, cannot read that on there. Yeah, I think this is, yeah. Everybody's pretty in agreement here. Jody says, was she really a lawyer? OMG. Yeah, that's, I think, probably the consensus amongst everybody. But anyways, you know what? That'll do it for us today. Appreciate you tuning in. We never actually did get into that the Biden administration being forced to cut ties with their social media friends. But maybe some other time. I'm sure there's several shows that are covering that. But appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of the social media platforms. Just type in JOBOB. If you dare, go follow me on, what is the new one? Threads. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because it's a new shiny object thing, but the Threads thing is I don't know why I find it so fun. It's pure chaos. Like if you follow me on Instagram or on Facebook or any of those, that's kind of tempered down. Threads is just 100% all gas, no brakes chaos. So follow at your own risk. But appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We will be announcing tour dates soon for the fall. Excited to come out to see y'all. Going to be stopping at a lot of different places. I was just talking with my wife about the travel schedule in the fall, and neither one of us are excited about it. But it's going to be fun, nevertheless, to see everybody live in person. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We will see you Monday. Have a great weekend. God bless America.